The first thing I noticed was the table. My mother never set the china unless it was Thanksgiving or Christmas, but tonight the plates gleamed under the chandelier like a warning. Crystal flutes lined up at every seat, and a bottle of champagne rested in an ice bucket beside my father's chair. For a Sunday dinner. It felt staged, rehearsed, like I'd walked into someone else's play without a script. I sat down, smoothing the napkin across my lap, pretending not to notice the arrangement. Dorian, of course, had been placed at the head of the table. My parents flanked him on either side, smiling as if this was the natural order of things. I took my usual spot, halfway down, where no one's attention lingered for long. Dinner began with small talk that felt thin, stretched too tight to cover something larger. My mother asked about work. I gave polite answers. My father poured the champagne, though none of us had lifted a toast yet. The bubbles rose, catching the light, distracting me until Dorian cleared his throat. "So," he said, leaning back in his chair, the picture of ease. "Next week I'll be moving into Alara's place." His words landed casually, like announcing a new gym membership. Mom and Dad said it'd be good for both of us. She won't be so lonely in that big house, and I can save on rent while I get things sorted. I tightened my grip on the water glass, knuckles whitening as if pressure alone could keep me steady. The words stung, not because they surprised me, but because of how unsurprised I was. I had seen the boxes in the garage labeled with Dorian's things. I had overheard my mother whispering on the phone about how perfect the timing was. Still, hearing it declared in front of me, as if my consent had already been signed away, made my chest burn. My parents beamed, raising their glasses in celebration. My father's voice carried over the clinking crystal. To new beginnings. Around the table. Everyone lifted their champagne. Everyone except me. I set down my water carefully, my other hand brushing against the edge of the purse at my feet, where an envelope waited for its moment. The smile on Dorian's face widened, but I already knew the celebration was premature, because I had come prepared. I let the silence linger for a beat too long, the weight of their toast pressing against me like a dare. Then I reached down, sliding the manila envelope from my purse and placing it in the center of the table. The shift in the room was instant glasses paused midair. My mother's smile freezing at the corners, my father's brow furrowing. "I have news, too," I said, keeping my tone even. My hand rested on the envelope as if anchoring me to the table. "I sold my house last Friday. The couple closes in 30 days. For a moment. There was nothing but the sound of champagne fizzing against glass. Then Dorian's flute slipped from his hand, shattering on the hardwood floor, bubbles spreading like a stain. He didn't move to clean it up. "You what?" His voice cracked, disbelief tangled with outrage. My father pushed back his chair sharply, the legs scraping across the floor. "Ilara, don't be ridiculous. You can cancel a sale. There's always a cooling-off period." He waved a dismissive hand, as if paperwork and contracts could be erased with a gesture. My mother's lips tightened. "We already promised Dorian he'd have a place to stay. You can't possibly expect him to find something in 30 days. I kept my fingers steady on the envelope. "It's done." The word hung heavy. Final. Across the table, Aunt Rosalie tilted her head, eyes narrowing just slightly. But she didn't speak. She only watched, as if waiting to see how far this play would go. My parents exchanged quick glances, their united front cracking just enough to show the panic underneath. Dorian's face flushed red, his mouth opening and closing like he couldn't decide whether to argue or shout. I leaned back in my chair, feeling the shift settle over us. The game had changed, and, for once, I wasn't the piece they could move. The call started the next morning. Aunt Lila's number flashed on my screen before I'd even poured my first cup of coffee. Her voice was heavy with disappointment. Each word sharpened to cut. "I can't believe you'd sell your house just to spite your brother." He told us everything. You're leaving him homeless. I hung up before I said something I couldn't take back. But the silence didn't last. Uncle Dennis, then Cousin Mallory, then even my father's golf buddy, each one repeating the same script, the same accusation, by noon. It was clear the story had spread farther than I could control. When I checked Facebook, Dorian's post glared at me from the top of my feed. Hardest lesson in life is realizing family isn't always there when you need them most. Grateful for those who truly care. Everyone else. God sees your heart. Dozens of comments followed sympathy, outrage, support for him. My mother's reply sat beneath them, shining like a seal of approval. We love you, son. We're always here for you. I slammed the laptop shut, pulse racing. At work the next day, I caught the shift in the air. Victor Lane, my colleague, leaned against my cubicle wall, his expression tight. I don't mean to pry. Ilara, but people are talking. Your brother came into the cafe downstairs and told the barista you kicked him out. Word got around fast. Heat rose to my face, but I forced a steady breath. He was never living with me to begin with, I said, but the words felt flimsy against the narrative already moving through the halls. By the end of the week, I stopped answering calls. Every voicemail blurred together lectures dressed as concern. Disappointment wrapped as advice. The noise grew louder, while my own truth felt smaller each time I tried to speak it. In the quiet of my kitchen, I stood surrounded by half-packed boxes, the evidence of my reality pressed against the walls, while the world outside decided its own version of my story. The accusations swirled louder with every passing day, but none of them knew the truth I carried alone. The sale of my house wasn't born from spite, it was survival. Last spring, a storm peeled back shingles like paper, exposing 3 separate leaks. The contractor's invoice had read $11,000, a number that nearly knocked the breath out of me. I emptied my vacation fund, took a small loan, and told myself it was a one-time emergency. But emergencies multiplied. A month later, the water line burst, flooding the yard and seeping into the basement. The city handed me the bill, $8,200. I remember standing in the kitchen that night, eating ramen straight from the pot, staring at the damp streak climbing up the wall while trying not to cry. By June, the heating system gave out. $5,000 more. I maxed my credit card for the deposit and begged for a payment plan. Each night, I sat at the table surrounded by bills and statements, scribbling numbers in columns, recalculating until the digits blurred into nonsense. Neighbors waved at me in the mornings, probably seeing a woman who had it all together. They didn't see the dark circles I failed to conceal, the way I punched new holes into my belt instead of buying smaller clothes when stress whittled me down. I became skilled at disguising exhaustion, at smiling when I felt hollow. One evening, while sorting boxes, I found the framed photo from the day I bought the house. There I was on the porch, keys in hand, grinning so wide it looked like joy might split me in half. I traced the edge of the frame with my finger, remembering the feeling of triumph, of pride that no one could take away. I wrapped the photo carefully and set it in the keep box, the reminder of who I once was and the proof of what I'd built. When the doorbell rang a few days later, I was still holding the tape dispenser, sealing another box shut. The knock at the door was sharp, insistent, the kind that didn't wait for permission. I already knew before I opened it who would be standing there. My parents flanked Dorian like an honor guard, his expression sour but triumphant, as though he'd dragged them here to set me straight. "Eden, we need to talk," my mother said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. My father followed, already scanning the half-packed boxes with a look of disdain. Dorian brought up the rear, his arms crossed, his eyes darting over the stacks of sealed containers like a thief measuring what he'd lost. "You can't really be serious about selling," my father said, his voice carrying the weight of authority he'd used on me since childhood. "This is just a fit. You'll regret it once you've calmed down." I didn't stop taping the box in front of me. The sound of the dispenser cutting across cardboard was louder than his lecture, and for once, I let it drown him out. "Ilara," my mother's voice shifted into her coaxing tone, the one meant for fragile patients or unruly children. "Your brother needs stability. He's going through a hard time, and you've always had more than enough space." I folded the flaps neatly, pressing the tape down with the flat of my palm. "Did anyone ever ask what I need?" The words startled even me, hanging in the kitchen like something foreign. My father frowned, as though he hadn't heard correctly. Dorian scoffed, muttering under his breath. "I need stability," I repeated, more firmly. "I need to sleep at night without worrying if another bill will swallow me whole. I need to stop bleeding my savings dry on a house I can't afford to maintain. And I need to stop being treated like my life is just an extension of his." My mother blinked, lips parting as if to argue. But nothing came. My father cleared his throat. Staring at the ceiling, even Dorian shifted uncomfortably, though his silence didn't last. "This isn't fair," he said finally. I sealed another box and placed it with the others. For the first time, I didn't look up to gauge their reactions. The sound of cardboard stacking neatly against cardboard was answer enough as I prepared for what I knew would come next. They called it a family discussion, but the setup made it clear what I was walking into. Chairs were arranged in a circle in my parents' living room, as though an intervention were about to begin. My father sat stiff-backed, my mother at his side, while a cluster of aunts and uncles filled the remaining seats. Dorian lounged with false ease, the picture of a wronged son. But I hadn't come alone. Margot, my financial advisor, sat beside me with a neat folder on her lap. Victor, my colleague, leaned against the wall with crossed arms, his expression cool. And Dorothy, my mother's old friend who had quietly offered support for weeks, gave me the kind of nod that steadied my nerves. My mother began the script. "Ilara, we're concerned. Selling your house like this, it's impulsive, and it punishes your brother. He has nowhere to go." I opened my own folder and laid the documents on the coffee table. One by one, roof replacement, $11,000, waterline repair, $8,200, heating system failure, $5,000. These aren't whims. They're the reality of owning a house alone. The room quieted as I placed the bank statements on top. Balances dwindling with each page. Aunt Rosalie, who usually played silent observer, leaned forward. Her sharp eyes moved from the bills to Dorian. "I've watched this family bail you out of rent, cars, credit cards. When does it end? Why is Ilara always expected to shoulder more while you drift?" Color crept into Dorian's neck. "I'm between jobs," he snapped. "For how long?" Rosalie's tone was unforgiving. "At some point, responsibility has to land where it belongs." My father shifted uncomfortably. My mother pursed her lips, but no one rushed to defend him. Dorian's chair scraped against the hardwood as he stood, his face dark with anger. "I don't have to sit here and be attacked." The slam of the door punctuated his exit. Silence hung heavy. My parents exchanged looks, the confidence they carried into the evening replaced with unease. For the first time, I wasn't the one shrinking under the weight of judgment. I gathered the remaining papers back into my folder, already bracing for their next attempt. They came back 2 nights later, this time with smiles rehearsed to look conciliatory. My mother carried a pie as if dessert might soften the blow. My father spoke in the falsely cheerful tone he reserved for tense negotiations, and Dorian trailed behind, his expression carefully schooled into gratitude. "We've been talking," my mother began as they settled on my couch. "We think we've found a solution, instead of moving in with you. Why not help Dorian get his own place, just a loan to cover a deposit and a few months' rent? With your success, it wouldn't even set you back." My father nodded, eager to press the point, a small gesture to keep peace in the family. "It's only fair." I let them speak, then reached for the folder I had prepared. "I can't give him money," I said evenly. sliding a single sheet across the table. But I can offer him something better. Dorian picked up the business card I placed beside it, frowning. What's this an opening at my company? Entry level. But enough to cover rent on a one-bedroom. I already spoke to HR. They'll interview you if you're interested. Before he could respond, my father's eyes caught the spreadsheet under his hand. Line by line, it listed every financial bailout Dorian had received in the past 5 years' rent payments, car repairs, credit card balances. At the bottom, a total circled in red more than $30,000. My mother gasped, covering her mouth. My father stared at the figure, his face darkening, not with anger at me, but at the undeniable proof in front of him. This isn't punishment, I said quietly. It's reality. Love isn't endless rescue. It's teaching someone to stand. The pie sat untouched on the table as silence spread through the room. For the first time, their certainty faltered, and I saw them as unsure as I had always been. 3 weeks later, the movers carried the last of my boxes into the loft. The space was smaller than the house, but the sunlight that poured through the tall windows made it feel expansive in ways walls never could. The silence was different here too, no longer hollow, but open. My new mortgage was nearly a third less than what I had been paying, and for the first time in years, my budget showed more green than red. I spent the first night surrounded by unpacked boxes, eating takeout on the floor and feeling lighter than I could remember. No creaking pipes threatening to burst, no roof groaning under another storm. Just clean walls and a future I chose. Margot stopped by a few days later with a bottle of wine. She wandered through the loft, nodding at the half-furnished rooms. "You know this isn't running away," she said, handing me a glass. "It's choosing wisely. You cut the weight before it sank you. That's not weakness, it's strategy." Her words sank deep, soothing the lingering doubt I hadn't admitted aloud. I had grown used to believing that endurance was proof of strength, but maybe letting go was its own kind of courage. On Thursday evening, I walked into my first photography class, camera in hand. The room buzzed with quiet energy students introducing themselves, tripods being adjusted, lenses clicking into place. I slid into a seat near the back, feeling nerves give way to anticipation as the instructor spoke about light and shadow, about seeing the world differently. By the end of class, I had already exchanged numbers with 2 classmates, both eager to practice together on weekends. I walked home through the city streets, camera slung over my shoulder, a sense of possibility thrumming under my skin. When I opened the door to my loft, the boxes waiting to be unpacked no longer felt like a burden, but a beginning. When my parents invited me for dinner again, I braced myself for the usual tension, but the moment I stepped into their dining room, I sensed something different. The table was set simply no china, no champagne, just a roast chicken and a basket of rolls. The air felt lighter, less staged. Dorian was already seated, fiddling with a fork, and when he looked up, there was something unfamiliar in his expression. "I started training this week," he said after a pause. "Entry-level stuff, mostly paperwork and errands. But it's a start." My mother's face brightened. "That sounds promising. What kind of projects do they have you working on?" He shrugged. "Almost shy. Social media campaigns. I'm learning as I go." For once, my father didn't dismiss his answer or turn the spotlight away. Instead, he nodded. "Every job teaches you something. Stick with it." I sipped my water, listening as the conversation moved back and forth without the usual undercurrent of blame. My parents asked me about my photography class, and for the first time in years, their curiosity felt genuine rather than perfunctory. Dorian kept glancing my way, as though expecting me to cut him down, but I didn't. I only nodded when he described his tasks, offering encouragement without taking ownership of his progress. The balance held, delicate but present, like the fragile stem of a wine glass that might break if handled carelessly. As dessert was served, laughter rippled around the table, soft and cautious, but real enough to remind me that something fundamental had shifted. It wasn't resolution, not yet, but it was a beginning. Later that night, as I drove home, the memory of that simple meal stayed with me, carrying me into what came next. The loft was alive with warmth the night I opened my doors to friends who had become something closer to family. Victor brought a stack of board games, Margot carried a bottle of wine, and Dorothy arrived with her usual wit, filling the space with laughter that echoed off the bare walls. We crowded around the coffee table, plates balanced on our laps, stories flowing as easily as the drinks. For once, I felt surrounded not by obligation, but by choice. Later, when the others had gone and the loft quieted again, Dorian lingered by the window. His voice was low, hesitant. "Can you help me with a budget? I don't want to screw this job up." I nodded, surprised by the vulnerability in his tone. We spread his pay stubs and expenses across the table, and for the first time, I saw him leaning into responsibility rather than running from it. A few days later, my parents stopped by. The conversation was halting, awkward, but different. My mother admitted, softly, that they hadn't realized how much they had asked of me over the years. My father said little, but the silence was no longer dismissive. It was reflective, uncertain. They didn't have answers, but they were willing to try. As I packed away the papers from Dorian's budgeting session, I felt the truth settle quietly inside me. Boundaries hadn't broken us. They had forced us to grow into something new, fragile but real, like the beginning of a different story.